when texts are open to interpretation, and they are because they're in a foreign language, and there's layers of translation that you have to go through before you can even get to meaning. And then there's the way that Western thought might colour how something is interpreted in the texts. So I think there's a danger there for me, whereby I can see how people might set themselves up as an authority, a Buddhist authority, based on their interpretation of texts. I also think there's a positive to that for our practice. So the way I see it there is that it brings me back to what we call the ancestral line. So when we do our morning services, we chant our ancestral line. So that's a lineage, really. That's a handing down of the scriptures from master to disciple, which is to me, is a sacred relationship, and one where there is a lot of practice, experience, thought, depth of all of those things. So over time, that's how an unbroken lineage is formed. And when we chant that in the mornings, that brings me back to a transmission line, really, which has, for me, it has authority. So that helps me to navigate different practices. So I have looked into other forms of Buddhism, and this one to me feels the most authentic because of that transmission line. And also, because the scripts are in foreign language, then you have a lot of different translations, and that means that, one can study the scriptures through a lot of different translations and make a comparison, really, and then you can get the feeling of where things are going in the scriptures. So the more academic side of me likes that as well.
Well, I think it matters because they're open to interpretation. Because let's take an example. So you get one of the famous Buddhist scriptures is the Lotus Scripture. And it has various stories in it talking about the ultimate, as you might say. It's saying, well, this is the ultimate, and it doesn't necessarily tell you how to get there. But if I was to sit down without having meditated and read that, I'd be able to understand the word, well, most of the words, and I'd understand what it's, the story. And I would go away saying the Lotus Sutra is this. I start meditating. I read the Lotus Sutra, say 2 years later. I read the same thing. And then I go away thinking, well, no, the Lotus Sutra means this. And on it goes. And maybe not even fully ever penetrating the real heart of the Lotus Sutra, depending on the effort I put in. That's inevitable. One can't escape that. It's almost like saying, well, I'm not going to start meditating until I have complete and pure knowledge of everything. Now I can start meditating. By doing it, only starting where you are, which is here, you're obviously going to have all the limitations that your life up till now is giving you. So I won't understand the Lotus Sutra. But what it might do is inspire me to look further. There might be something there that speaks to me. It speaks to my heart opens, and that leads me on. So I don't need to look at it critically, and I don't need to worry about misinterpretation, because that is the nature of the beast. Hopefully there are teachers around who can maybe point you and say, well, actually, no, I think maybe if you read it this way, try reading it this way and then see what you find. But generally speaking, you find your way through it. But if we then acted upon things where thinking we know the truth, but we don't really quite know the truth, but we think we do, then all sorts of things are going to come from that. We probably unfortunate, to say the least. So we have to go with care. But it's very important, I think, maybe with any religious text, is to say, well, what is the basis of my life that is going to interpret this? And so to reiterate the different interpretations are maybe not something we need to worry about too much, because it's an inevitability, and therefore we can accept that as an inevitability of human life and just do the best we can in working out for ourselves how that's going to help us lead a fuller, richer life.